Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Transformed You. We're back in addressing more questions around the subject of trust. We've been in a series addressing the subject of fear and encouraging people and equipping people on how to address this subject and turn your areas of fear into your greatest victories. It takes some work, it takes some insight, it takes some equipping. And so we've been basing it around the subject of the book, I Will Not Fear. And of course, we want to encourage you to get a copy of it. It's available in paperback, audio, ebook, and then you can also jump into the online course. Those videos help supplement the book material really, really well if you want to go deeper. So we try to publish everything in every format available to you. Of course, if you love our video content and the things that we produce, go to markdejesus.com, click on the donate button, consider a one-time donation, or you can also consider a monthly subscription. You can join our partnership and just take advantage of all the different resources and books that we have. But we've been on this series and we started putting out questions, and more people are connecting with our resources, which is great. And we had a ton of questions. So we just took them and divided them up into topics. And we have a couple more, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, that we'll address in the upcoming episodes as well too. But here is going to be on the subject of trust. It's going to get a little bit into trust in dating, trust in marriage, trust relationships overall. And so I think that it needed its own episode. So what we're doing is we're taking the questions, we copied and pasted them and put them in. So even as we read through them, many of these we don't remember or have any idea who sent them in. So we're trying to just address the questions as they're presented to give input not only for the people who sent it in, but also for everyone else who's listening in, because I don't know about you, I like listening to questions being addressed.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So before we get into the subject of trust and answering questions, I think it's important to kind of lay a little bit of a framework. So if I could just share a couple things. When we talk about trust, sometimes I think it's helpful to just have some basic things that we put into the framework. Like if I'm talking about I trust you or I don't trust you, I trust God, don't trust God. I need to work on trusting God. We'll probably do a whole episode on what does trusting God even mean? That's becomes this like cliche, but trust is a major glue for relationships. It speaks of a reliability, like what I'm relying on, I lean or depend on, I put confidence in. When people say I have trust issues, they're struggling with a sense of confidence in a certain relational area of their life. It fuels our belief when we say I trust in, I believe in, and then it fuels our faith. So it's very important to realize that trust is a major thing to guard, watch over, to treasure. Because when trust is there, relationships become like more streamlined. They become efficient, if I could even use that word. They become very low maintenance. They become
there's an ease in which I think I'll use the word actual safety, so that you can really go there with things, don't you think?
Yeah, and trust is multifaceted. It's like
right.
I trust you with our finances, but I struggle in trust over here. So there's always growth and just keep building that trust. And when you have it, treasuring it.
Right. Well, don't you think trust really goes into the matter of the heart? So is my heart going to be safe in whether it's finances, anything, because if finances get messed up and I don't trust you with finances, that breaks my heart. So at the end of the day, to me, it all points back to the heart, right?
Correct. Yeah. Totally. When trust isn't there, relationships become very high maintenance, meaning it requires more energy. All these safeguards get put in. We get really heady. We can develop paranoia in the sense of, and people think, when they hear that word, I'm sure I'm not paranoid. That's too strong of a word, but it does
Suspicious. Yeah.
become very suspicious. I had a hard time getting that word out, but when you have trust issues, you jump to suspicion first, right? You meet somebody like, they're being really nice right now. What do they want from me?
Right.
There's those aspects. So recovering trust takes intentionality. I think it takes defining what trust is and defining what does it look like in our relationship for us to have trust in each other. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, is two people coming together, whether it's marriage, dating, work relationship. Even in my pastoring work, there were people where they lost my trust with certain things that they did that were very untrustworthy. And it's like, okay, here's what we're going to need to do to rebuild trust. And we need to find agreement on that, to find our pathway to recover that. And it takes a journey, and it takes like addressing walls you put up. It takes the self-protecting mechanisms, because it takes, you can tell me what you think. It takes two to tango in this, because you could say, well, you lost my trust, and here's what we need to do to rebuild it. But at some point, I have to also be willing to make a decision
Of am I gonna trust?
Am I going to trust?
Right.
Do I even want to? Because many people could say, I have trust issues, and they use it as like a wall of protection that's impenetrable.
Right.
That's like, okay, I get you. Those people were untrustworthy. But if you move on from that relationship, you still got to work on this, because that wall will imprison you. And you could say, well, people aren't trustworthy. At some areas of your life, you got to be willing to take the step and trust again. Because otherwise it's going to infect your personal wholeness journey, your heart, your relationship with God, and everything. And I think that something I used to preach on when I was in regular preaching series in our church is, can God trust you? We talk a lot about, I got to trust God. I got to trust God. And I think that phrase becomes cliche.
Yeah.
I got to trust God more. I got to trust God more. Well, what does that actually mean? And then when I ask that, it's very theoretical, very out there. And it's like, what does it actually look like? And then it causes them to do some work and define, well, what does this actually mean? And I've done a lot of work in helping people define that and rebuild that. But God's looking at our journey and go, can I trust you with what I have of the kingdom? Because he who's been faithful with little will be, given more. There's that whole concept that we don't think about. That my journey is something that God wants to see, not in a condemning religious, kind of way, but in a sense of my life has meaning because God sees trustworthiness.
Right.
And stewardship of what he's given us.
Right. And we usually are asking God for very grandiose things in life. And he's probably like, hey, wait a second. You have a hard time caring for your own kids and your house. And you want to run a major ministry. I'm using that as an extreme example, but it's
true.
right when you think about it.
It's true. God give me millions. Well, what are you doing with what you have now?
Right.
God, I'm going to go to the nations. Well, what are you doing with the 5 people right next to you?
Within your household of the property you do own, right?
Right.
And have ownership of, right. So anyways, we could do many examples of that.
Excuse me, I just snorted.
You did?
Yeah.
No, I didn't hear you. All right.
Those in the microphone can hear it. So let's jump into the first question. You think we're ready, or is there anything else that needs to be said?
No, I think that's good. I think that's a good starter to kind of jump off of. So yeah.
Okay, so this one, it is a little bit longer, but I think it needs to be read with the context. It has to do with relational fear, trust, and boundary questions. A lot of hurt here and a lot of how do I make decisions now regarding the relationship. The question you had me ask myself in the podcast was, what would I do if fear was not in the equation? If you want to check that out, go to past episodes in this series. Well, there is a lot I would do, and not so much would hold me back. I would have courage. I would not care what others thought of me. I would be able to have better, closer relationships and even trust more. Fear holds me back from trusting others. I don't even trust myself to have the wisdom to know what to believe when someone tells me something. I'm afraid of being deceived and lied to and not recognizing it. So I tend to believe nothing that is said until it's proven. Even if I got past the few fear issues, then there would still be the boundary issues. However, even if I was not in fear of things or people or what ifs in my life, I still think I need wisdom to know my boundaries and guidelines and rules for relationships that are good and okay for me and not out of whack or unreasonable. Yet they are my boundaries, but insecurities too and fears. I think I put up a lot of rules and boundaries because I've been hurt so much by men before. I have no tolerance for certain behaviors, such as female friends in my boyfriend's life and social media, etc., etc. I always live in fear. So do I run away? Is it a red flag to run? Are my fears legitimate? Is it just my trust issues? I find it very difficult to trust and in fear of being lied to and cheated on. So I just want to run away and be alone forever. I've been married to 2 Christian men who both let me down. They are still human and can still fail. Just because a man is a Christian does not mean he won't fail or fall into temptation, as I have done myself. And I don't ever want to be fooled again to think it can't happen again, but I need to be alert and aware of Satan's tricks. So on one hand, fear holds me back from moving forward in one area, such as not caring what others think and be in the same room with certain people who don't like me. But on the other hand, I wonder if my fears create my rules and boundaries and prevent me from trusting because I've been hurt a lot before. However, I know Satan can trip us up and tempt us, and men can cheat because they think a relationship with the opposite sex is okay and harmless. But I am not fooled to the schemes of the enemy. I put up a lot of walls, but what boundaries are okay? What are not okay? Some Christian pastors say all of everything needs to be in the open, including all passwords. I don't want to trust blindly, but when trust has been so very damaged, it's hard to rebuild. So I suppose it's got to be tough love to rebuild and strong guidelines. And I believe all relationships need to protect their marriage or commitment to each other by having guidelines and boundaries. And that is a good thing, as well as having an accountability person. But with all that said, in the turmoil fear in my head, I cannot be in a committed relationship with so-and-so. She put his name there. I won't read it. Or anyone because I do not trust. Fear has torment. But with all that said, in such turmoil of fear in my head, So is it time to move on? And I have tried to, but only to go back, only to walk away again. I was dating someone else for a very short time also. Very nice man who is Catholic, but not born again. I used to date him 24 years ago. He contacted me out of the blue, but there's nothing there, no feelings, no sparks. I left him too. I know I should probably stay single, but isn't that running away? How can I push through a fear if I'm walking away? How do I know if God wants me to push through fear or if he wants me to move on because it's not his will for me, he has something better for me? And then part 2 was sent in of the same area. My question is, how do I know if this fear is keeping me away from him or if it's the best thing for me to stay away and the wise thing to do because it's just not healthy or good for me? How do I know if fear is dictating the boundaries and rules that I want to put up, or am I being wise? So where do we begin?
Well,
I would jump in to say that there is some recognition of, okay, fear has infected a lot of my perspectives because of woundedness. There's no record here in her life of having a safe lens of what it means to relate to a man who covers her, keeps her emotionally safe, takes initiative, watches over her heart. It seems like there's been a record of that in place.
All right. So I feel like there's a lot to unpack here because just with that one statement, so you could say, okay, well, this person needs to probably not maybe be in a relation, especially if there's a history of toxicity in certain relationships. Like, why keep just beating the same dog? Okay. But we'll put that as a side caveat for a second. So when you're talking about most women, I would say 98% of the population, if not more, do not have examples unless you come from a very rare family where the father knew how to be honorable, loving, kind, etc. So then you go, okay, well, she has no examples. Where does she get this? Do you have an answer for that?
No examples of...
Where would she then find examples of where you would be around, oh, wow, this is what it's like to be around a safe man that you're not in a relationship with?
Yeah, that's... Well,
okay.
Well, it starts... Here's where I would recommend. You go back to, okay, at the end of the day, God is the perfect father.
Right.
So I've got to learn how to relate to him, and I've got to learn what a good father is. So that's where the discipleship, the work, the learning is pointed to. What does it mean to relate to a good father?
Right. And
because that's the lens that's been distorted, because you probably had a father who didn't equip you, love you. So therefore it sets you up to then, here's the key, to then be attracted to the kind of guys that are not the best.
Correct. And I think I bring it out kind of harshly because we keep looking to go, well, if I can just find it, then it'll fix me. And really, this is a deeper rooted issue of you healing those things, connecting with Father God, and learning what a good father is, what perfect love from the Father is. Because there is that theme that even regardless of the men, there is a recognition of her own self stuff, of what she's working through, which is good.
Right.
Because yes, the men relationships just pile on to what's already there.
Right. I would say, if we wanted to give straight advice to the situation, it is, take a step back and work on your lens with Father God of what that means. But here's the thing, and here's the question I would want to bring to you, is if you step back, are you really committed to working on yourself in that kind of way? Because your affections are going to pull you.
Right.
Because I get the sense there's a pull back. You really like this current relationship, or maybe, ones that trigger a lot of these areas. If you take a step back, you've got to be very, very dedicated to going, okay, I need to find some new circles of relationships. I need to find people that are heading where I'm wanting to head. I need to position myself to be taught and coached and mentored by people that have a sense of where I'm wanting to go.
Right, because it takes a real dedication to say, I don't want to settle for less than anymore. Mm-hmm. And the dedication to say, I'm not going to give in to the loneliness. I'm not going to give in to that addicted part in me that's addicted to this person, because codependency, all of those things, yes, there's relationship there, but most of the time when we look at our unhealthy patterns, there is a part of you that's addicted to the person, because in a lot of ways, I'll joke, your demons are friends. And so you're used to the dysfunction of the relationship. It's comfortable. You get lonely.
It's very true.
And we have a very hard time detoxing relationships.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do that very healthily. We just don't. Maybe we'll do an episode on that.
Yeah,
but
the areas of your life and the other person's life, they do tend to try to attract each other. This is the hard question that people need to do without guilt, shame, and condemnation. Just get honest and get real. What's in me that causes me to be attracted to these guys? And I'm not saying all these guys are 100% evil. I don't know them. So I'm just going by the question here. But if it's a problematic pattern, I need God to heal what I'm attracted to. Right? And I find, and this happened to me, it happened in you. We just had this conversation today. You and I coming together, we both went through seasons where on a typical basis, we would not have been drawn to each other.
No. Right.
But it's interesting how both of us were going through personal renovations that then shifted what we were attracted to, because what we begin to delight in, we work on the rejection issues, father issues, lust issues. You're working on what kind of things you get pulled towards. As God heals that, you start being attracted. And I'm not just talking about just dating for marriage. I'm talking about even friendships, because many people, out of their friendships, they cultivate those love interests. Mm-hmm. So take these guys that are problematic, or the current boyfriend. What's the circle of friends around them? If he's problematic, the circle of friends probably are problematic too, because you are a summary of those kind of relationships, right? So then we're always pointing back to the empowerment pathway. And the empowerment pathway is A, working on yourself, and B, your ability to decide. Is when it comes to trust, it's like I no matter how untrustworthy somebody is, I have to aggressively work on myself.
Right. If we could, I think it would help people if we shared a personal example of where you and I had to walk through areas early on in our marriage of how I, coming from a very horrific history of not trusting people, and how we had to work through a lot of that in each other.
Well, I think that I'll rely on you more to help me to understand what because I have some thoughts of how that happened. But when you and I came together and we started dating and it got serious, I was a pastor on staff, and there were some relationships that I felt I'd moved on from, but it was like there was still like some communication that would come my way. It seemed tricky for me because I was still on staff. So you're trying to still be a pastor to people, but yet there was some history of some dating relationships and things like that weren't
clearly
moved on from.
yeah, right.
Right. And I had to learn and understand, what does it look like to grow up and mature in certain areas.
Yep.
So then it triggered trust issues with you,
Right.
of like, what's going on with this? What's going on with that?
Right. And it hit for me, when I look back at that time, very big insecurities I had to work through when you and I got together, of that I wasn't good enough. So coming into the situation where you were on staff, I've jokingly shared about this in seasons ago, of where, a lot of women in the church had a prophetic word, or their mother had a dream that they were going to marry you. And you had a lot of those scenarios where I was not liked because, they wanted their daughter to be with you, or the daughter thought, we had a couple. There was one that wasn't pretty.
Some of that was really, really weird.
Really
too.
weird. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's a whole other episode. But but that would ping off of my insecurities. Right. So you had one scenario of a woman that you had kind of an undefined relationship with, flirting or not flirting, good friendship or whatever. You and I
there would be communication coming towards me.
Right.
And I remember a couple of situations like that where communication came my way, and it would trigger in you, because I would respond like, well, I'm a pastor, so I should probably respond. And then it would trigger in you like, wait, what's going on here? And my first response was defensiveness, which was like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm just writing back a proper thing. Hey, I'll even show it to you, or whatever. But I didn't realize that it communicated to you that in situations, I'm going to be put second, third.
Right.
Does that make that
right.
right?
And as a woman, I know a lot of women can relate to this. You start going into the like, well, why did she feel she could email? And you start going into these like accusatory things that really, when we had to dig deep into this, for you, it was an integrity issue of you within ministry, because that's how you were trained militantly, of like, you have to handle these things. And we are now married and trying to walk through our healing journey of what it is to be married. And so this pinged up, pinged up a couple times. And so I think one of the big things that I want to bring out about those things is, if they would not have been healed if it wasn't for some major things that took place individually in Mark and I. And there was something very special about how aggressively, and I'm going to use the word aggressive because you are very tenacious in your self-help, growing, healing. You took our relationship and made it a priority, where you had to recognize. And it wasn't like, oh, good, I recognize, no, there was excruciating things that he had to recognize in himself of what he didn't know. And you were diligent in searching for your own healing in those things. And an important thing about that time, I was also on that journey as well. Mark cultivated that in our household, which then made it safe for me to do that. And I already was on my journey of that, but him cultivating that around me. I'd see him reading. He would read the word. He would watch videos. He was very diligent, and then he'd come to me and say, hey, so God showed me this. This is what I'm learning. There was a humility in when he would come to me and recognize things and repent to me. And you weren't a wuss about it. Like, you weren't like, oh, I'm so sorry. There was a strength in what you were discovering about yourself, that you would come to me in humility. You would come to me and say, you know what? After learning these things about myself, you know what? I'm praying for you on these things. I'm right. Like, you were very, very good at that kind of stuff, which made it the journey of me trusting you, like, so much better.
So
Did that makes
so
did that
before,
help?
yeah. So let me jump in,
Okay.
because before that there was a deep wrestling, because you and I would argue about these kind of things, and I'm like, I can't prevent like people from contacting me in these ways. So what I would do is I would argue the thing that you were saying, and I think that the reason we don't break through in our marriages and our relationships is we argue over the issue, and the issue's not the issue. Right. There's an underlying thing that there's a heart root area that needs to be addressed, right? And I was obsessed and focused with, from the surface, there's a Facebook message or there's a thing, I'm just being kind and giving a like just formal answer, right? But I had to we would argue and argue and argue about it, and we were like exhausted by it. And I remember getting to that place where I'm like, okay, like I need something triggered in me to just bend the knee. Not like bend the knee of like waving the white flag, bending the knee of like, God, I need you, because I don't know what I'm doing. Because obviously something's here that I don't understand. And I think men, we default to whatever's being brought, the rational conversation. We equate it. We go, no, that doesn't seem, it's like, no, it needs to go to a deeper issue. Yeah. It's an emotional, relational issue that we need to learn about. Otherwise, we're stuck in an argument. And at the end of the day, we're like, well, I'm right. And she just can't get it together. And so it's like, wait, I need to, this is woundedness coming at me, and I can be a part of the solution. And so the thing that clicked for me, I had to first humble myself. I had a lot of pride, self-defensiveness that I didn't realize. I had to come to the surface. And in the humility, it's like light bulbs come off. When you humble yourself, light bulbs come off. It's God's currency. It's just you bend the knee, and it's like the truth comes that you needed that you couldn't see before. Because he says he gives grace to the humble. It's like I'm going to pour it out. And in that, here's the key thing that I saw, and a lot of men struggle with this, is that in that moment, the driving force of an email or a contact was, what's the right thing to do for the ministry? And it subliminally communicates, when push comes to shove, the ministry comes first.
All right, well, take the ministry out of it. Why? Go deeper.
Yeah.
Okay. On a woman emailing in a inappropriate way, personally. Right. Take a ministry out of it. A man responding when he has a wife.
Yeah, I think that's
right. We're going deeper into.
Well, the shift is you and I are moving towards marriage. So we're at that marriage covenant level.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the answer to that is. It needs to be fueled by, you're first in my life. So these people in the church, if they get upset or bothered because I make a decision because of where we're at in our relationship, right, that to me steamrolled then into a whole different way of doing life. So like, let's say, I'm going to just kind of entertain this for a second. Let's say what you are feeling is just way off base, right? Putting your wife first recognizes that's where we're at, and I need to guard and watch over and protect this area as we're working on it. And who cares if they don't get a reply or if they get inconvenienced? I'm not in covenant with them. Right. I'm in covenant with you.
Right. Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So that then led up to me going, I'm sorry I didn't put you first in those kind of ways.
Right, because really that's getting to the core of a man loving a woman, right?
If I could just make it clear too,
yes,
like I wasn't
please,
there was no communication. I was hiding.
No,
there wasn't
any
like
of that.
there wasn't like somebody trying to approach me.
No.
It was just like, I'm getting married, and yeah, we shouldn't be. That needs to be over.
Right.
Right. So it was more down that line, but nonetheless, it hurt you.
Right.
That I'm like, I'm going to give, and this was something that just had to change, because I think in a lot of marriages in ministry, the wife is number two.
Always.
And even in business.
Right. Well, take out ministry because we're talking to people that aren't in ministry.
Yeah.
So
This is their job comes first, things like that. So it when you're establishing, what does it look like? Now it gets tricky. It gets really tricky when you have relationships where people are dating and they have kids from a previous.
Yeah.
This is where
we want to take that side tangent.
This is where it gets really, really challenging because when you come into a relationship where the person has a child with a previous marriage or a previous relationship or whatever, there has to be room for them to interact because that's their parent.
Right. And it's a very, very difficult thing to hear. And this is why God hates divorce, because it gets messy and it gets ugly and all of those things. But those children, that ex, were there first.
Right.
It doesn't mean wife and I are out on a date and I got to take a call from my ex. No. We're okay. There's boundaries and there's all kinds of things. However, when you have young children or you have things that need to be discussed, there is an element of priority that unfortunately those people were before you. And there's a respect that needs to be had about that, but within the context of trust, right? And you can only get that when you've really walked through and really hashed all this out together and worked to that place. It's not something that's just going to magically be there. It's not. You're going to have to go through a lot of yucky things. But I want to get back to the core thing of what it means inside of you to work on yourself, because that was ultimately with your and I's situation. We both had to tackle things personally to get to the place in decision. So what was the decision that we were going to make about our marriage and how we were going to put each other first? That only came out of our own personal growth and revelation of who we were, what we wanted, what was our past stuff that was affecting us now. And all of that stuff has to work in conjunction. Listen, this is not an easy road. And I wish I could say to people, you know what? You want trust? Sit down and say, today's the day.
Right.
Like, today is the day. It doesn't work like that.
It
takes a lot of, hard heart work. But when you make that decision to say, I'm going to do this and it's going to kill me, and there's some days you may have to stand in the shower and scream because you want to pick up the phone and call that unhealthy person, but you go, I can't. For my life to be healthy and good, I need to do this. Or when it comes in your marriage and you go, I want to just scream and go ballistic or whatever. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work on myself. We're going to figure this out, and it's going to be excruciating and it's going to be painful. It's not the easy road, but it's when you come out through it and what you build towards is the most amazing thing.
What I hear you saying is
I feel passionate about it, but
because what I hear you saying is rebuilding trust, building trust. It's hard work and it's a call to go deeper.
Yes.
And we're so wanting to just live in shallow. We don't want to deal with pain. We don't want to have tough conversations. So we just live in the shallow area, and it takes hard work.
And I say in the shallow area, I would say this is for most of Christianity. We get a lot of information. Oh, that was a good sermon. Yeah, so good. Lord, do that for me. Yeah, I want this, I want that. Yeah, Lord, do it for me. Yeah, I want it. And we have this great desire of what we want, but we fail in the application, in the actual digging in and going deeper of what that means. You're going to have to finish that entire book, and then you're going to have to go, what do I have to do that feels so uncomfortable and I'm not used to doing, and do it and set new patterns and make new choices. We want the easier roads in all of this. We don't do that. We don't. And I know because I was there for a long time and would cry, God, you don't love me. You're not helping me. We want God to help and rescue. And he works with what you apply yourself to and dig into. And I'm so grateful for that in you and I doing that, because we've had excruciating times.
So go back to that. And you mentioned about you watching me working on myself and communicating to you, here are things I'm working on, here's things I'm building. But what, and we were having a little bit of this conversation this morning because you and I have a tremendous amount of trust for each other.
Yeah, we really do.
And I kind of sat back and I was like, all right, let's kind of evaluate. Like, so from your perspective,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of women who are telling their boyfriends, husbands, whoever, I don't trust you. What else did you see in me or in us or in yourself that helped rebuild trust / that you'd also recommend other people need to be aware of?
Well, first I'll go back to what I was saying about your journey. I watched you in a lot of ways get broken. I watched you get broken, and there was a humility that had to come over you because you say it.
Brokenness in the sense, not because it's different than the term broken heart. It's more broken of allowing God to break, almost like the term breaking a horse.
Correct.
You know, where
yes.
it's like we're gonna break the horse so that he knows how to follow directions of the master or the man that's riding the horse.
Right.
You know, to submit. Oh, right.
And I think that there's something, you know, we're lacking that in the culture right now of like real manly men and all that stuff. But a real manly man can be very manly, but yet very tender-hearted. And I watched that breaking down of God having to strip pride. You had to face those things of like, ugh, you know, yeah, this is not a cute part of me. Recognizing a lot of the root stuff to that too of, you know, and when you were growing up. And you were very good at processing out and then talking and processing in yourself and then processing out to me. Hey, this is what God's showing me. Like, this is what I just read. What do you think? And you would ask me, like, what do you think of, is this true about me? Eesh.
So having, because this is what I would recommend, what I'm hearing you say, you got to learn how to communicate. You got to learn how to sit down and talk out. Because in the conversation is where trust is built. Because you want to have heart to heart, not head to head. Because it's like, you know, yeah, but she called you, and it gets all heady.
It's not about a girl emailing or calling or so. It's not about those things. Those are just stupid things that are happening that are just, they're stupid. It's not about that. It's about a deeper core heart connect that needs to happen between two people. And that's what you and I fought for. We still are fighting for it because we still have things that we're still in process of.
Totally.
And it's so important. And so within that, now, if Mark did none of that, I still had to deal with myself in the issues in me of growing up with what I grew up with and the male relationships that I had where I was not trusting at all. But you cannot avoid the fact that it takes two people, and the man needs to set the standard. Sorry, he just does. I'm not going to avoid that. I'm not going to apologize for that statement. It doesn't make that men need to rule the house. Nope. A man should be leading. He should set the tone for the heart, the atmosphere, and the love in the house with who he is and what he says, and make it safe for all the other hearts in the environment.
So he's got to face his fear.
Absolutely.
Because I teach this, and many people write me back and go, what are you talking about? The man has to deal with his fear of his wife because he's afraid, because she represents vulnerability. She represents a opportunity for you as a man to have to humble yourself.
Right. And
the humility is where God's going to show you exactly what you need.
Yeah.
And humility is not, oh, sorry, hun, sorry. It doesn't. It's not a black and white equation. It's a humbling, so you stop the defensiveness and allow yourself to move heart to heart. So when I said to you, I'm sorry that I've not put you first, it like ushered in a whole different dynamic that I wasn't used to.
Look what happened shortly after all that with me.
Yeah.
Kneeling before you. Like, that's a whole thing, you know.
So then when you humble yourself, you realize, okay, I had no references for what it means to put your wife first. I heard it. Yeah, put your family first. It was just baloney, though. It was like baloney, because it was like, at the end of the day, there's certain decisions that, like, you got to just suck it up, kind of
Right.
things that we're like, wait a second. You having those heart to heart, those work on things. So, because in the heart to heart, you're having real communication, and then I'll see, okay, this is a vulnerable area for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to look at it with disdain or contempt, like you need to work on that. No, I'm gonna humble myself and sit with you and go, let's walk through this together.
Right.
So then I learn, what does it look like for you? This is, I think, huge. What does it look like in our context? What does it look like for Melissa to feel trust?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, it moved me, heart to heart conversations, very open about interactions, because then God called us to move into one-on-one coaching work. There's a lot of dynamics around that. Emails that to this day come in. How do we handle that? How do we handle this person and that? But it moved us where we have just like open lines where we just share and talk. There's not like these hidden channels.
Yeah, and if I could,
that get like hidden in darkness.
Right.
And I made a shift in my life where it's like, you have authority and right to speak into areas of my life.
Right.
And it's a blessing. I love it now. I joke, call you my second Holy Spirit. I appreciate it because you'll see stuff I don't see. But at first, it's kind of like, what are you telling me what to do? What are you telling me? All that stupid Norwegian, Puerto Rican.
Everybody, and we probably shouldn't have put the marriage word in it when we did the podcast. I think it's like the fourth one ago from this about the fears that hinder marriages, because we share like the top 3 things that, honestly, if you're dating, please watch that episode.
Yeah.
We go into some really heavy stuff in there on some really good things that not only prepare you for marriage, but then once you set that groundwork, then helps you in marriage when you tackle those things. And the big one is shame. And I think, we all have so much history and so much stuff that, number one, we weren't aware of. We weren't taught how to talk about it. I was talking to someone the other day. They're going to go through a divorce and they have 2 small children. And, she was just kind of asking some questions. And I said, get your kids to talk. And she was afraid of that. And I said, don't be afraid of that. Cultivate that, because kids are not stupid either. The best gift you can give them is tell me how you feel. Tell me how you feel. Express how you feel. And that was a key thing too, I think. And we talk about this in that marriage episode, is sitting across from each other and looking each other in the eye. I mean, come on. How many of you can say, yeah, when we sit there, my husband's like embarrassed and he puts his head down, or I can't look at him. And
he's afraid.
Right.
Right.
He's afraid, and he's afraid of the heart and emotions and all that because he wasn't taught.
And he's afraid if he says something that he's feeling, he's going to be judged. He's going to body slam him. He's afraid he's going to be rejected. All these things, but you still have to face it. So isn't it true though? Our trust struggles come to the reality that we're not having honest conversations with each other.
Right.
We don't know how.
No.
So we have all these things lying underneath the root system that have never been talked about.
Yeah, sometimes for like 50 years, right?
So let me take a slight tangent. I'm going to say a statement. I'm going to tell me what you think about it, because the question in here is about passwords. I should have your login information.
Yep.
Or maybe the husband's untrustworthy because you find out he has a pornography problem.
Yep.
And it's like you have access to all his history and things like that. I feel that if your relationship I can understand we're for a season. It's like, I just want access to your history because right now I don't trust you. Mm-hmm. I just want access to it. But as a long-term solution, I think that's a terrible long-term solution, because it's not. I think when
it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and when you enter into that kind of relationship, you don't have an intimate relationship. You have a relationship with a probation officer,
right? With rules. So good, right?
Like a probation officer.
Check in. Are you doing okay?
Probation officer. You got a call. Yep, I haven't left the city. Okay. Hang up the phone. Is that criminal changing? No. He's got his probation officer check in. The only way he's going to change is dealing with heart decision issues. Right. So I find that if that keeps coming up where you demand that, want that, yes, I could understand, like, sure, look at it. And I've seen where men will go, yeah, look at it, but it doesn't solve anything.
No, it
And then
doesn't.
he's frustrated because you're not dealing with the root issue. And the root issue is we're not having honest conversations. We're not sharing heart to heart. We're not going there vulnerably without body slamming each other and judging each other, to just understand we're both broken. We both have issues, and let's be able to work on it. I think what we do in rebuilding trust is we focus on, this is what I need to trust you. That's a good start. Because I think as a man, I tell men this all the time who have their wife tells them we have trust issues, because it seems to go that way a lot, is ask your wife, what does it look like to rebuild trust? The goal is not to get the formula. The goal is to listen for her heart, so that you're fueling the heart relationship. So it's like, well, I need you to give me the passwords. I need you to give this. Okay, that's just a symptomatic, it's kind of like just treating the type 2 diabetes without just getting off sugar.
Well,
right?
it shows there's burden on both people, because I could just have said basic things to you and felt right and been right? There was a deeper part I needed to go, because in expressing my heart of what I needed from you, and then I want you to follow it up with when you were on your journey of all that, what did I do that helped that? So, or didn't help that, or whatever. Because I had my responsibility of my communication to you. Because if you can't sit there and demand everything you want from your spouse or partner, and then you not have your own responsibility and how you're searching for that and articulating that and getting to that yourself, it's twofold. And then when the other person doesn't live up to that standard, that is your wake up time to go, what do I want? What decision? Because it brings you to decision. When you can look at before God in the mirror before yourself and go, I've done it all. Decision point can come, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, going on a lot of tangents.
Well, I think that
I'm fired up.
I think the honest conversation is like, hey, I don't want you alone with any woman, or I don't want you, or like, that's just the start. That's not the solution. That's the start. And what should it lead to? Lead to honest conversations. So there were times where it's like, I would, CC you on emails, right? But it's like, that's high maintenance. If I do that for the rest of my life, you're going to have an inbox of all these emails to read. Like, you don't need that.
Right.
But there are times where it's important to do that. It's just a good, wise safeguard. But it's like, someone could say, well, this is what I want you to do. But what are we going to do about having heart-to-heart honest conversations and working on our marriage and going there? If someone's had infidelity, what's the pathway where the thing that caused you to have infidelity is healed, or is being healed, right? Because again, if you're like, well, don't do this and don't do that and show me your passwords, you're not dealing with the root issue, and that will happen again, and your fears will stay, and you'll never land, right? Again, this is not a simple equation, but it's a call to, we need a deeper level of relationship. And sometimes you cross that threshold where you start being really honest, and one person goes, yeah, I don't want this kind of relationship.
Right. But I don't think you can get there unless you do your own deep work.
Right.
We're all codependent. We all got issues, right?
Yeah.
And we can't be victims. We can't be constant victims to it.
So I feel like when you and I talk, I'm trying to evaluating myself in these ways, which sometimes is like challenging. Like, well, okay, why am I saying that? The thing that I want you, let's say you're saying all this to me, right? And a man could be like, this is crazy,
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Like, wait, stop. Okay, you feel that? I don't want you to feel that. That's my heart. I don't want you to feel that. We don't typically start with that. We start with like, what do you mean? I didn't do anything. You always do it. Like right? That strife and defensiveness. It's like, wait, you feel that way? I don't want you to feel that way. Starting with, she's the love of my life. I want to have a great relationship with her. So if she's hurting, I don't need to like try to argue your hurt, because hurt, it doesn't matter if it's rational or not.
Right.
Because men have the same areas. Nobody listens to me. I work all day. No one appreciates me. It's like, that's not true.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. You feel that because it's hurt. When you're hurting, whatever comes up, most of the time, you think is the gospel truth. That's why we need each other. Because we associate all these things. Men can't be trusted. Women are controlling. Jezebel. We slap these labels on hurt, and it's truth to us. So that truth then gets reinforced because we look for it. Oh, see, look at that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because see what I'm telling you,
Right.
because you're looking for it. All that to say, you have to deal with your hurts, because your hurts, whether you suppress them, whatever you do with them, they form truths, and I'm putting my hands in quotes,
Right.
that you associate with how you do life. So I had to realize, okay, this is how you're seeing things, and I want to be a part of the solution. And it's not my heart to make you feel that way.
Right.
So then I get embedded into my heart the pain I saw in your eyes in some of those conversations. And I'm like, I don't want to be the cause of that. Now, there may be times where you're firing something at me that has nothing to do with me, but I'm the target
Right.
because I'm closest to you.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a dad issue. It could be a past relationship issue. And I have nothing to do with it. But because I'm your covenant relationship, those we're closest to get the
Right.
brunt of what we're feeling.
Right.
And vice versa from me to you. I find I'm the most empowered when I don't have layers of defensiveness, where I go, okay, what's the heart issue here? What's really crying out from her heart? And I don't go, oh, you've got a little wounded girl coming at me right now. No. It's just something I'm becoming aware of, and it allows me to just listen.
And honestly, I don't think that you could have really gotten to that point unless you really did the work that you did on yourself that made you more okay with yourself, more confident in who you were, more mature in your own heart, where then you were able to say, I can put my focus into what her heart needs right now. It all works hand in hand. I don't know that you can truly.
So what does a guy need to work on? Talk to the guys for a second. And we're not
I'm not
making
trying
them.
to just blame all the dudes.
We're not blaming the dudes, because it's there's the other way too. But what we're just sharing is, most of the time when there's trust issues, there is a man and there's a woman, and the woman is crying out, I don't trust. Okay, so we're just sharing from what we're getting. High percentage that profile.
Right.
Talk to the men. What do they need to do besides humbling themselves?
Well, I think that there's a recognition that needs to take place on what you did not have growing up, and really digging deep on how that affected you. I think that most people, and we talk about this in every single episode, and understanding our history, our emotional history. Your parents formed who you are, and it's a very mature person that can look back and go, yeah, my mother never hugged me, she never touched me, and she screamed at me all the time. Probably didn't help me have any kind of compassion for anybody. There are things that you need to do. Listen, I often joke about it. We live in the day and age of coming out of the Oprah 80s and 90s. There's every self-help book. There's everything out there to help you understand your history. So it's not for a lack of information. It's for a lack of not trying. And you have to get to a place of, how bad do you want it? Do you want health in your life?
I would say,
what do you want it to look like?
I would say not trying at the heart level.
Right, that's what I mean. Absolutely at the heart level.
We try it
Yep.
like well, I need you to change your passwords, or I need you, and it's like we kind of stay in that, and then we feel like that doesn't work, so then we feel like, oh, it's hopeless. We never really got to the heart to heart. When you get to heart, everything changes.
Yeah, and there's an element of recognizing, and you do such a beautiful job when you talk about understanding sonship and who you are as a man, and who you are as a son of your mother and father, and what you would have wanted. And then ultimately, which is why we turn to Jesus and say, I need a savior. I have these things that are far beyond me, and I need a savior to come in and help me. and understanding that you have a Father in heaven that loves you and that can be then exchanged with him. And there's a deeper heart level that we're crying. I mean, look, Malachi, what's going to happen? Restoring the hearts of the fathers to the sons and the sons to the father. That is what we are crying out for. That's what your women, your daughters, your sons. Go home and look at your family and look at your kids. Are they zoned out? Are you all not? Like, start to get into a deeper place in asking God, show me the heart of my family. What needs to be worked on here? There's a deeper place and deeper questions that can be sought after that can bring such fruit into your life by just simple things that you can do. That then, we know this in our own life, you would read a book, talk to me about it. It leads you to something else. It leads my heart to a greater healing because of what you said. And it all snowballs together. And there's beautiful things that come out of it when you go to that place real deep in your heart and make real connections. Mm-hmm. Covenant is a beautiful place. And that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to get married. Mm-hmm. I think most people do nowadays. Well, some millennials, maybe not. But we want what covenant is. But we're very afraid to go there to have the heart of what it really means, right?
Right.
Do you want to add on to that? I could go on and on in this episode today.
I don't want to add on to it. I would say, I would just kind of, as you're talking, just looking at the question and some of the things from a practical standpoint, to kind of bring a landing place to her question. If I'm in your shoes, I would recognize I don't know how to have a proper discernment of what's healthy and not healthy. That's first and foremost. So therefore, I need to invest in as many resources as possible. See, what people don't understand is when I was going through the junk of my junk of mental and emotional health issues, I invested so much into teachings, meetings with people, prayer sessions. I traveled hundreds of miles just to have somebody sit down and pray with me.
Right.
Okay? That was it. That's how hungry I was. Now, there were times where I was like, I'm hoping for like the breakthrough fix, right? We all have that.
We went through
and then I realized I needed a process.
Yeah.
But understand the heart. I used credit cards to pay for things. Like, judge it however you want. I don't care. I wanted freedom.
Right.
I bought expensive resources and materials that I was just like, I just want to be free. And would I rather be emotionally free, mentally healthy, have good relationships, and then have some debt I got to deal with? Or do I want to have great credit and a great budget, but I am absolutely tormented? There's a value decision that I just made. Yeah. I'm not putting that on you. I'm just saying that when you have a whatever it takes attitude. So I would have paid people that I would have helping you. Therapist, coach, whatever, just find the best place to start. I would have casual relationships, like people that I know, where you sit down and go, hey, can I take you to lunch? I would pay for lunch for people where I'd go, hey, can we sit down and just talk about this? And I'd ask them questions.
And sometimes it would go good and sometimes it wouldn't, but you still did it.
Right. And I would walk away going, yeah, I don't want a marriage like that.
Right. And you know what, though? I want before you continue, and I don't mean to cut you off, the word investment keeps coming up here.
Right.
It costs you.
Right.
If you want it bad enough.
And Christians are cheap.
Christians are awful
in that area. They want the world to come to them and help them, but they don't want to like invest. Like right. You may have to go, you know what? I may not move to that next house that I want to get because I'm going to invest in some conferences or some things. I may go to that program in that place and I'm going to extract everything I need because at the end of the day, what do you want? Do you want money, wealth, or do you want great relationships? Something's got to take the edge of the priority. And again, I'm not telling people just go into debt mindlessly. That's not what I'm saying. No. What I'm saying is this kind of stuff takes investment because our families didn't equip us, our relationships around us, and going to church on Sunday isn't gonna do it either. It's just not. You got a nice big crowd you're sitting with. There's no intimacy. There's no working on things. You're just watching something on stage. That's not going to deal with what we're talking about. What we're going to deal with is like smaller level, one-on-one, group settings. Like I'm going to find the areas where I'm just going to work on it. And you're not going to find the perfect like guru person that's going to be magical in every area of your life. It may just be they help you in this area. But what you need is you need the mirroring of what's healthy. You put a situation out there and they mirror back to you truth and you go, oh, okay, check. I learned in that area. That's what healthy interaction looks like. Oh, that's codependency. Check. Now your discernment's developing, right? I had to position myself into to people where it's like be willing to sit down with someone and slide $100 bill across the table. Go, thank you. I just want to, I just want to bless you, right? Or I remember this is an old illustration, just kind of comes to mind. I remember John Maxwell, who's a very famous, well-known leadership person. He would travel and meet with very influential pastors, and he'd say, I'm going to pay you $100 to just talk to you and ask you a few questions. And many of them would go, I don't want your money. It's not the point. He'd go, I want to invest in this. Right?
There's important value in that.
So the reason I bring this up is because I was invested in it. It put me in the position of making sure I put the time into it. Like it's great that you find YouTube videos, things like that. It's great. But you need structured things that you're putting yourself under. Get a grid of like, these are things I'm putting around in my life. And even I'm going to start changing my circle of friends. I want to develop new friendships that are going where I'm going, where I can't just fall into my old patterns and that's the status quo. The people around me, they go, hey, come on, like we're going to, they sharpen you to pull out the better that's in you.
Yeah.
It takes an all-around approach to address these issues. Otherwise, we're never going to break through. So
it's so true.
I'll try to address. There was another one that said I have trust issues, trust in relationships, and there was another one that said on the topic of trust and fear in relationships, I'm so thankful for my husband. We have a great marriage in so many ways. However, in the areas where we've hurt each other, how do we rebuild trust again? We have grown and are growing a lot individually in our relationships with God. We've received a lot of healing from him individually, but we're now at a stage where we need to rebuild trust with each other and grow together. But it's very hard to trust in certain areas where we've been wounded. It's easier to trust in certain areas where the other person has changed and we believe we won't be as easily hurt again. But what about the areas where the person hasn't changed? How do we trust in those areas again? You and I looked at this real quickly before we went to air, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, to me, there's a conflict in how the question's presented because it states we're growing a lot, but we don't trust. I think that the assessment of growth equals the increasing of trust.
Correct.
Growth goes hand in hand. So I would say, well, what does growth mean? Because the growth is I'm working on my woundedness, and maybe what's being said here is, she says, I'm thankful for my husband, so I'm assuming it's a female. She's saying that we're both individually working on our stuff, but now it's time to trust and take action, right? So in some ways, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that that's what you said. We got to work on ourselves and now come together. I think that, the growth of the relationship and personal growth now needs to be, it's no longer me just growing over here. It's now I'm growing with you.
Right. It's breaking through the fears of what it looks like to sit across from each other at the table, stare in each other's eyes and share what you've been growing in. Hey, do you see that in me? Having the volley back and forth about issues of the heart, those consistent things, and the other person seeing them manifest is what, to me, it builds trust.
Yeah.
It's what we experienced.
I'm trying to take our own life. And to me, it goes back to the next step I recommend is honest conversations that can be done in a shame-free environment.
Yeah.
So where we've been able to say things like, I don't feel like I don't feel like you listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like you're paying attention. I don't feel like I'm connecting to your heart. I don't feel like, and the response not being, well, what do you mean? Give me an example. Sorry, I go into my
Doing the dishes.
I go into my imitation voice of stubbornness.
I'm too tired.
Right. Moving past the defensiveness and just recognizing, okay, that's how you feel, and I want to learn about that, and it's not my heart to make you feel that way. How can I move towards that more? Where I'm more mindful now in my day of not just doing my day. I want to be mindful so that I'm going, all right, when Missy's working on this, this is what she's communicated to me. I add that to my awareness now. So I'm nurturing that, right? So that moved us into having honest conversations, which we've really tried to have continually.
Yeah.
And sometimes it hits nerves.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Because I feel like you're attacking me. And I feel like because I have a deep wound of being misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. You do.
And when I'm misunderstood, because I value integrity, and I'm like,
You do.
wait a minute, that's not my. I'm like, okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I want to learn how to work on that. And so I've always said this to you. I say, I don't want you to have to feel that way. It's not my heart to make you feel that way. So how can we and we don't leave the room, we don't walk out. Like let's just hang in this discomfort right now. Because right now I'm just wanting to walk out and just be like, forget it. And like, why are we even doing this? And all that stuff. Like, no, let's just hang in here in the discomfort. Let's keep going. And now get to that deeper place.
Yeah. If you could go back to where the original, I asked you, while you were going through your whole process, was there things that I did or didn't do that made it helpful or harder in you trying to gain my trust?
I was surprised at how quickly you handed trust over to me.
And I responded to, yeah.
And I if I could equate it to anything, I think it's just like God broke me in a good way of just humbling me.
Right.
And stop getting in these heady arguments and of well, I'm right and you're just not understanding. And I was like, yeah, what would help? Would this help? Yeah. And we just kept talking. And then it was just like established over and over again that you trusted. And so there was an openness from my communication. Hey, I ran past, so-and-so in church today. It was kind of inappropriate how they did this.
Yeah. And we could laugh about it
And it was just like, you saw a pattern in me of like, hey, this situation happened. And I wasn't like in this paranoia. Sometimes I'd feel it inside. Oh, is she going to yell at me or is this going to go weird? It's going to go weird, but I'm going to share it anyway. And there were times where you'd ask some questions and I would answer and walk through whether I was nervous or not.
Right.
And then we saw a pattern where you're like, oh yeah, we just talk about it. And I was like, wow, this is.
Well, you proved yourself to be trustworthy. And you proved yourself in that way of tending to my heart. And that's why we want to always bring it back to that of how you ultimately valued my heart.
Here's what I think.
Oh, tell us.
Here's what I'm going to think. I think God had to work on some issues of my life in how not only I relate to you, but understanding the female wounds of my heart, right? And my father wounds and those kind of like understanding Father God and things like that. And I think that as I worked on myself, it took more hooks out. And I think you came to a place where if something happened, where some woman, because we're using that illustration, if some woman acted inappropriate, you had trust that the hooks aren't there.
Correct. That's very well said. Selah. That's very well said. Very good.
Right.
Did everything I say trigger that in you? I'm kidding. See how we work to. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
This is all
this is my humor.
This is evaluation in real time.
I know it kind of is. I like it actually.
I don't have.
You know what? No, babe. That is so well said.
So I'm thinking
that is so true.
There's something spiritual
that I did not think you were going to be hooked in. Right.
There's something spiritual about a man getting free of that, and he can be like, he could be doing everything right, but there's just like a hook in him.
for attention from a female, any kind of love and affection. That's what we're talking about, that deeper root.
Right. Right. So I feel like I feel like that's something that as God works on that, but then there's still a place, no matter how much I'm working on me, you got to trust.
Right.
You got to step, and you responded to that.
And you made
So
it
I
easy.
think,
right.
so I'm hoping that people working on this, if you sent the questions in, both of you listen to this episode and listen with your hearts. Listen through like twice. Let it wash over the first time, and then the second time take notes. And just see what the Holy Spirit through our conversation brings to the surface.
Yeah, and I highly recommend the previous episode of The Fears That Hinder Marriages. It's really good.
Yeah, and if you want to do some deeper work on our training site, we have a series in a couple different modules called Marriage for Overcomers. It deals with some really important subjects, and we try to write a lot of materials and things to address this. And we're going to continue this Q&A and go to some more questions in the next episode. I think the next week's one's going to delve more in possibly either into marriage. We had some stuff on OCD. We'll perfectly figure it out. But man, would you get a copy of I Will Not Fear? It may be a good place to just start reading this with your spouse. Read it with your wife. Guys, go, hey, hon, we're going to take 15 minutes once a week or whatever, and we're just going to read this together, and we're just going to talk about it and see what comes to the surface. And get a group together. If you also want a good supplemental book, my newest book, The Heart Healing Journey, is out. I'm in the middle of recording the video content for that. So there's going to be some great e-course stuff that's going to be out there, but it's available in paperback and audio and ebook and all different kinds of formats. But man, I just hope that this episode, we went into this going, let's just talk and just see where it goes.
Yeah.
And that's we pray that that's a blessing to your life. We're using our journey, our struggles, and our battles, but sharing it in a redemptive way. Sometimes in the age of vulnerability, we share stuff and like, oh, I'm just being vulnerable, #vulnerable, and we're just like dumping unproductive. We try to take vulnerability and allow God to redeem it and make it redemptive, meaning this, I'm sharing this, but here's where I've come from in that, and here's where I'm headed.
Yeah.
And that to me takes the culture of vulnerability and really empowers it, because we're authentic with each other, but we're heading in directions of healing and not just remaining stuck in the things that bind us. So anyways, we pray this is a blessing to your life. More than anything else, we pray it adds grace, it adds love, and adds insight to where you're at and the issues of your heart. And we look forward to seeing you guys again next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Look forward to future episodes.